Welcome to Podsongs, where we interview inspirational people in service to others as inspiration for a new song. Today's guest is journalist and author Dorian Lynskey, and my musical collaborator is Indonesian singer and activist Kai Mata. Hello Kai, welcome to Podsongs.
Thank you so very much for having me, Jack.
And you're in Bali.
Yes, I am. The tropical island.
Wow.
Wow, indeed.
Yeah. I mean, normally I'm in Italy, so normally I'm the one that gets, oh my God, you're in Italy. But now it's my turn to go, oh wow. Because I've been to Bali once, and I have to say it's my favorite place. I mean, it's just, it's not all great. I mean, Denpasar, is a bit chitty.
That's where I live, Jack.
Sorry, why didn't you go up to the mountain?
No worries. It's not a place for a tourist. Denpasar is not for tourists. Denpasar is for people who live here and are Indonesian.
There's too much traffic.
I like it because it's central. And I also recognize as an Indonesian, it feels really nice to be surrounded by Indonesians. Sometimes when I'm in the more touristy areas, I feel like I'm a minority in my own country.
Yeah, you go up to Ubud and it's Yoga City, no?
It is Yoga City, and everyone is from everywhere else in the world except Indonesia. And it's a very awkward situation when I'm eating at a restaurant and I walk up to go to the restroom and come back and someone mistakes me as a waitress and tries to order food for me. I'm like, yes, however, I'm a different Indonesian that's also eating here. You could just ask the waitstaff. I know you'd very rarely see Indonesians eat next to you, but I'm also a patron. Thank you.
So you enjoy saying that?
I do. I'm like, let me whip you with my words.
You speak better English than a lot of Americans I've spoken to as well. So.
Oh, do I? Thank you very much. That's complimentary coming from an English person.
Oh, obviously not as good as me. I mean, I'm English, so.
Yeah. You are the founder, of course. You're the ones that colonized the whole world, practically.
No. Yes, actually, sorry.
It's a yes. But yeah.
Yeah.
Not you personally.
Apologies for that.
Thank you.
For me personally.
Yeah.
I left a long time ago. I left England 20 years ago, so I have no responsibility for anything.
How old are you?
That's why I'm 43 now.
What? You look young.
Oh, thank you.
Wow. Oh, Jack.
Well, I eat olive oil drink olive oil for breakfast.
Of course. It's all the pasta. It's all the carbs, right? Carbohydrates.
Actually, probably not. I try and avoid that.
You do. Oh, okay.
But it's the same. When I was in Asia, it's just rice as well. So it's carbs. Everywhere's carbs.
Yes.
But let's get back to your music, because thank you for agreeing to come on the show. That's just great. I'm really, because I find myself annoyed by Americans, as you are, when you go to restaurants, is that they're everywhere. And also on podcasts. In podcast land, 90% of my guests are Americans, and my listeners. So I also want to say that the Americans are great as well. So
yes, but it's America's number one. Let's just make sure they know that we believe their propaganda. Woo. Yes.
But it's great to reach out to you in Bali. And let's make this international. Let's spread this. Let's reach out here.
Of course.
So I found your music on Spotify on a playlist, and it's fantastic. It's the taste of Bali. It's sunshine, it's fresh mango juice, it's a glass of joy. Your music.
Oh, question: am I supposed to be recording my audio right now?
Oh yeah, you can do. Yeah.
Let me do that now.
Yeah, we'll use this as part of the interview.
Okay, recording my audio now, just so you have that. I'll send that over to you.
Okay. So tell us about your sunshine. How did you get that sound, and what are your influences, and what are you writing about? Let's dive into Kai for a bit.
I like to write about my own personal life. Songwriting has been a vessel for me to explore who I am first, and then figure out how I can put that into words and rhythm and melody for other people to hopefully understand as well. I think music can be a beautiful way to create connection and foster connection. And I know when I write a song, that song starts with me, but when I release it, that song doesn't just become my own anymore. It becomes whoever listens to it in that moment. They can take it and interpret it how they please and bring that into their own life and their own story. Right now, I think the world needs some sunshine, and I'm grateful to live in a place that has a beaming sun every day of the year, and a place where I think it's important to try to foster a sense of camaraderie and support and love in a world where we're unfortunately lacking in a lot of those things at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And you're a lot of people around the world connect with your music, though. Especially the lyrics, I think.
I think so too. Yeah, I'm assuming you listen to Where Love Goes, correct? That was probably the big one that you have heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's been my biggest hit so far, and I'm super grateful that I worked with Animal Feelings, who's an Australian um dance jungle dance genre. I really don't know how to describe him. But that was a good collaboration. And I actually wrote that song about this time I flew all the way to the UK to meet a woman that I had never met before.
Okay, go on.
Yes. It was kind of like a love at first swipe type of thing, and she had invited me uh to England. So I went to visit her in the Midlands of all places.
Jesus. We went from Bali to the Midlands.
Yeah, and it was cold.
Yeah.
I know.
This is not have a happy ending, this story. I know it.
Of course not, it's the Midlands.
Hmm.
Yes, no offense to people in the Midlands, I do like Birmingham. However, we did not really last, and it was a worthwhile shot, but it inspired the idea that I am going to go where love goes, while at the same time realizing that wherever I go, love will follow. So it's this kind of symbiotic relationship I wanted to paint.
Hmm. And you have an Italian girlfriend now, so maybe you're coming to Italy as well.
Perhaps. We'll see. I probably need to just really train myself in terms of how much food I'm meant to consume there.
Oh my God, yeah.
Right? It's a feeding culture, right? Love is shown through food.
It's important to the phrase is stop bene grazie. That means like, please stop me. I am suffering from stomach failure
It was that.
in a polite way.
Okay, so that is the key, the magical keywords in order to.
That's one of the first phrases I used. Yeah.
Okay,
Please stop feeding. Please stop feeding me. Yeah.
and it works,
No, it doesn't really work.
of course, but at least you tried.
Yeah, you should try. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that lesson.
No problem. And so I guess today is Dorian Lynskey, who wrote Revolutions, 33 Revolutions a Minute, and is quite a famous music journalist. And so your songs are also you're talking a lot about gay rights and equality and things like that. So is that why you were motivated to speak to him?
Precisely so. I've heard of his book, 33 Revolutions per Minute, and I've read a lot of commentary videos that cited him as one of their main resources. And growing up partly in the US and internationally, especially in the US, I saw the strong usage of music in terms of protesting and in terms of
Mhm.
creating movements. I look back at that and I think that's such a powerful vessel to create change. And at the moment, in a country where gay rights and human rights in general are being stifled, I hope to utilize music as a way to get my message across as well.
Oh, what's the situation in Indonesia then? I mean,
I think the best way to sum it up was last year, a bill almost passed that mandated conversion therapy for anyone that was suspected to be in the LGBTQ plus community. That was quite intense, and that actually kind of shot me forward to step up and say something. This is a
Okay, wow.
Yeah, this is a country unfortunately afflicted with more recent conservatism in terms of our traditional cultures, a lot of them, which Indonesia is so diverse, um, used to include a lot more ideas of acceptance, and we had multiple genders and a lot more tolerance for that in traditional cultures. More recently, it's been washed away, and it's unfortunate that it seems like we've all just been brainwashed to forget about that.
Because Indonesia is a group of islands.
It's like 17,000 islands.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot.
It is quite
So
it's
there's no
quite a bit.
Bali is not, Bali is, even though we see it as this well, we think of it as a liberal paradise, don't we? We think of it as a hippie place, but you're saying that it's it's still under the Indonesian regime, and what they want happens there.
And I also want to point out that Bali is a paradise because that's what is perpetuated for people coming for a short term to view. We cannot judge what America's economy or um social structures are like based on our experience visiting Disneyland. And it would be
It's
kind
a
of
good.
like assuming that.
Okay, yeah. You're the Disneyland of Indonesia.
Yes, well, when you go to the more rural parts, you see that that's where the Indonesian culture shines and comes through, and it's beautiful. Um,
Hmm.
when we're participating in places in which it's meant for tourists, that is a show. It is a surface level discussion on it, and it's something to do. Seeing traditional dances are super important, but then when you talk about the culture and the fact that I know a lot of Balinese Indonesians whose parents asked them to go through conversion therapy and basically the Balinese version of exorcisms to hopefully pray out the gay from their systems. And that's something
Okay.
that is not visible to people who choose not to see it. And of course, when you're on vacation, you don't choose to see that.
Hmm. Have you thought about reincarnation, about past lives? Is that in Indonesian culture?
Um, it depends on the religion. It depends. Indonesia's such a vast country with so many different cultures. We officially have 6 different religions:
Oh, wow.
Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Catholicism, Confucianism, and Buddhism. So some of those cultures believe in reincarnation. Others,
Mm.
I know a lot of people still have influences over the traditional, more animistic style of worship, where it's like, as you probably saw in Bali, they make these little prayer baskets that they put everywhere.
Yeah,
Um,
for the divas.
yes, the divas.
Oh, the nature spirits.
Yeah, like the divas. That's a okay. I was thinking of a different
Not
term for diva, like
different spelling, yeah.
yeah. That's I think has a lot more roots in animism rather than typical like what we associate with Hinduism that we've seen in India. So it's interesting to see the way that culture, traditional culture and religion and how they intermingle, create different versions based on I just guess I guess intersectionality.
Mhm. Okay. Alright, so with your music, you're trying to I mean, do you feel scared, or have anyone tried to force you into conversion therapy?
I'm grateful that I have accepting parents, and I also have a lot more privilege than the typical Indonesian individual who is gay. I have parents who love me and accept me, which is rare here. Unfortunate for people
Mhm.
who are in the LGBTQ plus community. And I have privilege. Being able to speak English fluently gives me an audience that makes it easier for me to connect and build community with people who are more likely to accept me in this day and age. And I also have a
You
platform of a small but mighty army behind me who I know, well, when I was growing up in Indonesia as a teenager and I was coming to terms with my sexual orientation and realizing I liked girls, I thought I was the only one in Indonesia that liked girls. I
Mm.
felt so alone. So my goal right now is to be who I wanted there to be when I was younger.
Mm. Wow, it must be a real. Do you feel pressure in that position? People are looking up to you in there.
There's pressure. I know this is responsibility, and it's a responsibility I don't take lightly. And it's a responsibility I know needs to be filled because I needed that.
Yeah. Especially if people are facing new laws which could make not their lifestyle, but their their personality, who they are, illegal.
Their whole
It's
sense of
kind of
self and a
yeah.
part of who they are.
Mm.
Yeah. So
That-
I think that speaking to our guest today, Dorian, will be an interesting conversation regarding specifically protest and music, but also his focus on Orwell and the way he's really delved into that.
Bingo. I was just going to say that. Yes, because he's the two books he's written that I know about are this revolution book about revolution songs and also about 1984, the book biography of the book. So yeah, these I knew there would be some synchronicities in here. I just couldn't see what they were going to be, but now I'm seeing it speaking to you. So that's great. So we have to write a song that combines this.
Yes,
More pressure.
more pressure for you and your team of 3 guys and
Yeah.
4 sometimes.
Sometimes four, yeah.
Okay.
But no, we have to we have to narrow this down. We have to ferment and digest this and focus. We will do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm excited.
And is there yeah, me too. It's and is there anything else you want to speak about before he comes on?
Um, basically, of course, you're gonna guide us through this whole thing as much as possible. You're gonna navigate these waters for it. You're the captain of this ship.
Because you had a COVID vaccine today, is that right?
I did. I was
How are you
jabbed.
feeling?
Uh, more lethargic than I thought I would be. I thought I'd be all fine.
Mm.
Then I realized a friend received it yesterday and he was wiped out completely. And I was like, at least I'm alive and not napping right now. So thank you. It's good that we had this
Yeah.
podcast to keep me up and just make sure that I'm like maintaining status quo.
Well, if you keel over halfway through, then I'll know what it is.
Yes, and
I
then
won't.
then we'll just have to
I won't
turn this from just like an audio recording to a video recording and it will go viral.
Yes, they're good for the conspiracy theories. A singer collapses after COVID virus vaccination. That'd be great.
Exactly. Talks to 2 British men, collapses.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah,
Colonialism
great.
through a video call.
Oppression.
Yeah, suppression.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Great.
perfect. Anything you want to clarify with me?
No, not really.
Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Dorian.
Hi.
So welcome to the show. This is Kai in Bali.
Hello.
Hi, Kai.
Hi, Dorian. Lovely to be acquainted with you.
What we were talking about for a song. Maybe you could start us off. What do you think would be a good
Hmm.
of all your work? What do you think would be a good point to focus on?
I've never tried. I should say I've never tried to convince someone to turn something I've written into a song. So you'll have to tell
Hey.
me.
No problem. Well, let's start off with because we can talk about both your books. Maybe you could tell us a bit about the first one and how you came to write it.
Oh, so that was I don't know when that would be. Maybe in the mid noughties, I did a few articles back when there were more of a travel budget for freelancers, where there were just stories that related to the connected music and politics that I found interesting. So I did a piece about a Serbian pop star who was married to the warlord Arkan, who at that point was dead. and she was being prosecuted for, I forget what now, but it was obviously things related to to what her late husband had been doing, and it was quite a scandal because she was one of the biggest pop stars in Serbia. So I went over to Belgrade to do that, and then I did a piece about hip hop in Israel, and there was a Zionist rapper and an Arab rapper that I interviewed, and then somebody who was just like a moderate Jewish rapper. So I was trying to get sort of the spectrum of politics, Israeli politics of hip hop. And then I think I did something in Kenya with some rappers, and I did something in Ukraine around the Eurovision Song Contest, which happened to fall just after the Orange Revolution there. So they just had a change of government. And so it was a weirdly politicized Eurovision. So it was like, I thought, oh, this is fascinating because there's protest music around the world, and each story there kind of revealed something interesting about a country that maybe I wasn't that familiar with, and certainly I thought readers wouldn't be familiar with. I mean, apart from Israel, I suppose, and Palestine, where people are quite familiar with the politics, the others felt very new and interesting. And I thought, oh, I love the intersection of music and politics, and I tried to sort of get a book idea together, which would be based on those trips and then also involve some others, where I was just trying to show what different forms of protest music, or at least different intersections of music and politics around the world at that particular time. And we're talking, during the George Bush years, after the Iraq War. There just seemed like lots to write about. But that didn't really get off the ground. And publishers were sort of like, well, why will people be interested in this? Which is always the problem when you're trying to sort of sell a book, is that you're really interested and you're trying to convince people that they should be interested because readers will be. And then one of the publishers who turned it down said, well, I'd be interested in, why not just do a history of protest music? And my initial reaction was because there's too much of it. And then
too many protest singers, not enough protest songs.
Too many protest songs as well. There's too many of everything. And I thought, well, that's a big ask. And then I suppose I was thinking about it, and I came across, I thought of this sort of 33 Revolutions sort of pun. There was like an album, hip hop album in the early 90s called 33 Revolutions per Minute, by a group called Marksman. And I thought, actually, what if, use that concept and therefore chose 33 songs and then got the narrative through those songs, and across the 33, I thought that gave me enough to represent all the different forms of protest music, certainly in Britain and America. And then also I realized that there were certain forms of certain artists elsewhere, Bob Marley, Fela Kuti, and Victor Hara, who had a real connection to Western music. So it wasn't going to be obscure. There were things I was fascinated by, like sort of Thai folk in the 1970s, but that's its own story. It doesn't really connect to popular music. But of course, Bob Marley and Fela Kuti and story of Victor Hara do connect. So I did manage to get out of Britain and America for those. And then I realized, oh, actually, you can cover the span. You can go from the 30s through to what was then the present day. And through each song, and not every chapter is about one song. Some of them are about sort of two songs that sort of relate to each other. Some are about, I choose a song to represent an entire scene or a particular political era. And so that one I did manage to sell. And that was, and then there was just a really fascinating process of just learning, because some of this stuff I knew very well in the 90s, for example. I lived through that. I knew the politics, I knew the music. And then there were other things like the origins of the folk revival in America, the history of like the Communist Party in America, or, Victor Hara and the story of Chile in the 70s. These are things that I just had to read a lot about and learn a lot about, and then try and see the connections between different artists in different places, and almost try and find the threads between people who had a similar temperament. For example, the people who had a more kind of healing, gospel influenced, moving on up kind of ethos. and others who had a kind of just a more sort of furious burn it down approach, and that crossed genres and that crossed countries. And so it was the diversity of it that I really, really liked, because one question that I got asked in pretty much every interview I did about it was, what makes a great protest song? And kind of one of the things I was trying to say in the book is that, well, there's no rules. You can have something that you can have a disco song, you can have a punk song, you can have a really sparse folk ballad, you can have hip hop. And then within those genres, you've got all different kinds of ways you can do it. You can do it very simple and sloganeering. You can do it as a story, as a little narrative. You can do it as something that's more impressionistic and more about a mood. And so, I think if I was trying to say the main thing I suppose I was trying to say in the book was to think of protest music in very, very broad terms, and not just go to, Bob Dylan or The Clash or Public Enemy, who obviously all feature and are all great, but just to sort of realize how many different ways you can get politics into music. And that I think a narrow definition of a protest song, particularly in the sort of 21st century, is not that helpful, because it evolves. And so if you're going, well, why aren't there songs like, War by Edwin Starr or Blowing in the Wind, then you may well, but then you'll be misled. You'll be disappointed, because then you'll go, I guess there aren't any protest songs anymore, which is obviously not true.
But did you restrict it to songs that were written as protest songs originally, or songs like We Are Family, the people that get adopted afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I had to restrict it to an extent. I mean, I mentioned songs that took on another meaning, and you had that a lot with disco, because disco was not overtly political.
Yeah, I can't think of any disco protest songs.
Well, there's a chapter about a disco protest song, which is Born This Way by Carl Bean, or I Was Born This Way. And there's, there's protesting Chic's songs, but then there were songs that were definitely not meant to be protest songs, like I Will Survive or Ain't No Stopping Us Now, which became embraced. Sort of anything that was about, endurance and survival and sort of rising up became very important in across a lot of axes. So you could have something that was a gay anthem, a Black or Latino anthem, and a feminist anthem, because of the messages that they were conveying. But sometimes there was if you were Nile Rodgers, who used to be in the Black Panthers, in a very sort of minor capacity, then you were trying to get politics into disco. But then there are other people that weren't trying at all, and it was just what the audience wanted. And I think that is an interesting tradition. And so that's one of the strands in the book. But it's not something I could lead on. You can't base a chapter on that, because of course, when you get to the songwriter's intent, it's not political. But it is fascinating how certain songs become adopted in certain ways. And then I suppose the opposite version of that is something like Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen, which is a really political, angry, disillusioned song that was interpreted in the wrong direction. Like in the other way, it was interpreted as kind of like a celebration
used the campaigns
of America
by Republicans.
Yeah, which was kind of bizarre. But then that continues now, because Trump at his rallies, you had a kind of like mixtape that would sort of go round, and obviously some of it was just comical, because he obviously didn't listen to lyrics ever. So you'd have something like, when his last speech as president before he got on the helicopter, he leaves the stage to YMCA by the Village People.
Gayest anthem ever.
Yeah. What message that was trying to send. Right. So I don't know what he could possibly have been trying to say. And my assumption is that he just didn't listen, or whoever put the songs together just didn't think. And so he would sometimes arrive at a rally to Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival, which is about how a rich kid could avoid serving in Vietnam. And Trump, of course, is a rich kid who avoided serving in Vietnam. And so, one of the things about pop music in general, whether it's protest songs or not, is that a lot of the time people do not listen to lyrics.
That's disappointing for a lyricist
Yeah.
like us.
It's really disappointing, but even fans don't listen to lyrics that much. Like, I suppose what really
You're making it worse.
What really intrigued me about writing the book was that you could dig into these really famous songs and find all these kind of strange details and little sort of contradictions and intriguing kind of mysteries. And these are songs that I might have heard, dozens of times in my life, but I hadn't sort of drilled down and gone, okay, exactly what are they doing here? I'm a sort of music critic, but unless I'm writing about a song, I'm not necessarily going to be alive to every single nuance. So if you think of your kind of average listener, well, that's like they're just picking up on the tune and maybe the words in the chorus. And so I suppose it is one of the problems that protest music can have, is that if it's not super obvious, a lot of people aren't going to get it. So if it's war, what is it good for?
Mhm.
You're fine. If it's fight the power, you're fine. If it's something that's a bit more subtle, then inevitably not everyone's going to get it.
But when you're writing as a music critic, isn't most of the review about the lyrics because it's something you can actually dissect and describe? Otherwise, it's like dancing about architecture.
Well, I don't agree with that line. I mean, I do think, that of course you can, it's no stranger than writing about visual art or cinema, anything. If you're writing about anything that isn't just the written word, inevitably you're using the written word to describe other things. And I don't see a particular difficulty doing that with music as opposed to any other kind of art form. But yeah, I mean, it does give you a bias towards the lyrics because that's something that's very solid. But for me, the pleasure certainly in writing that book was how the things went together, because you really had to think about, and you're drilling down into one song, which is great because sometimes you're reviewing an album and you don't give enough attention to each song. You just, this is how it kind of hangs together. This is the overall thing. When you're drilling down into one song, you start noticing all these really interesting things like, what complements the lyric, the relationship between the lyric and the music. Does the tone of the voice change? Does the emotion change? Does somebody get angrier or sadder? How does the music help set the scene? So like listening to some like Strange Fruit by Billie Holiday, I was interested in the way that it sort of walks you to the spot of this atrocity. It really feels like you're approaching something from a distance and you can't work out what it is. And her voice and the instrumentation leads you on this kind of this sort of journey to the sort of heart of darkness, I suppose. So it's the relationship. When you really think about the relationship to the lyrics and everything else that's happening in the song, I mean that's where you have these sort of breakthroughs of understanding. I found, where I suddenly was like, oh, this is what it's doing. And maybe not every songwriter thinks that deeply about it. And I'm sure that on some occasions I've come to a conclusion or a theory about something which was maybe not in the songwriter's mind at all, because there's a lot of spontaneity and serendipity, and not every song is kind of, crafted over a long period and every single nuance explored. And sometimes there are just these weird little blips and mistakes. There's like a famous mistake in Pride by U2 about Martin Luther King, where Bono sings Early Morning, April 4th, and Martin Luther King was shot in the afternoon. I think I've remembered that correctly. Anyway, it's wrong. He gets the wrong time of day, and he'd read a book about Martin Luther King. He, cared deeply about this song, and it was just sort of human error. And I don't have a theory that I could have come up with some real theory about why he changed the time of day, but I read an interview in which he'd gone, I just got it wrong. and now I change it every time we sing it live. And I was like, it's worth remembering that like not everything is intentional. You're allowed to have these theories, but I liked to make a distinction between something that was my theory as a critic and something that was the intention. So wherever possible, I interviewed the songwriters. You know, I couldn't get to speak to Bob Dylan or Stevie Wonder, but wherever possible, I spoke to the songwriters and was like, okay, what were you trying to do?
Oh. And did you have any conclusions after the book then became music? Does it have the power to change things?
I think I came to the conclusion it had the power to change the way that people think. But it's interesting. Sometimes you don't really know. It's a shame sometimes you can't do the interviews about a book before you finish the book.
Oh, yeah.
Because certain questions come up where you're just like, oh, I didn't, you know, like that I found quite weird. You know, like I said, how do you know, what's the perfect process on? And I was like, well, that's
another book.
There isn't one, you know, there isn't kind of one way of doing it. And the other one was just like, well, what can it actually do? What can it actually change? And there's like a handful of songs, like a tiny, tiny handful of songs in Western pop, at least, that you could go, okay, they had a real effect. The Nelson Mandela by the Special AKA really played a huge part in raising awareness of Mandela. He was not that famous at that point. And it was part of the whole process of, you know, the fight against apartheid. There was a strategic decision to focus on Mandela and to get the international community to put more pressure on South Africa. They sort of put the spotlight on this one figure. And that song really helped in that respect. And there are some others where I feel like probably Meat is Murder by the Smiths probably encouraged a lot of people to become vegetarian. But, you know, art doesn't change policy. It can't change policy. And that's the same with, you know, movies and paintings and so on. So it can't change the world in that respect. But what it does is perhaps changes people's thinking at the heart of somebody's political awakening. It teaches you about stuff. There's so much that you can learn about. And there's also why I suppose why I felt that the book worked structurally was that you could just pick some songs, and really all I was doing was explaining the context of those songs. That's what the book is. It's just giving people enough information to understand the events, the era that led to a certain song. So on a personal level, an individual level, these songs could do all kinds of things. And then sometimes the artists, if they want to be activists, if they want to be, you know, Bono or Tom Morello, or, you know, extreme example would be, you know, Victor Hara, they could then do a lot. But if you're saying, okay, well, can you relate a song to a policy? Can you say this song made this change? Probably not. But there's very few novels. There's hardly any novels you can say that about. There's no paintings. You know, Picasso's Guernica did nothing to avert war. But, you know, it doesn't mean that it isn't extremely powerful.
Almost impossible to directly link specific governmental changes to any one part of pop culture, correct? The question I have is regarding an artist or person with a platform's sense of responsibility. What do you think their sense of responsibility for utilizing their voice and their potential platform to reach other people? What do you think the responsibility is, if they have any at all?
I don't think objectively they have a responsibility. I think where process of music comes from is when people feel that they have a responsibility. And so you've got this category of people who are very politically driven from the start and start making music almost as a vehicle for their ideas about the world. So Public Enemy is a good example. They did not sort of stumble into politics. But then you've got the Marvin Gaye example of somebody that was making no political songs during the 60s and was feeling more and more sense of guilt that he was doing very well and making a lot of money and getting a lot of attention. Well, his brother was in Vietnam. There was unrest in Detroit where Motown was based. Due to kind of like racist policing. So he was aware of all of these things that he was not addressing and what's going on. I think one of the things that makes it so brilliant is that all this sort of pent up guilt and sort of growing consciousness and sense of responsibility. And he was like, I need to express how I'm feeling, but also to kind of maybe capture how a lot of other people are feeling. And it's got a wonderful kind of humble title, that album. So it's what makes that so good, and what makes a lot of protest music so good is people feeling like they've got to a certain level and it can't be just about them. They're looking for another purpose. And sometimes that can be related to religion. I'm sure that's certainly the case with you too. That they have a real sense of moral responsibility, and they're thinking, okay, well, what can I do with my platform? But if somebody chooses not to make political music, I think that probably means that if they did, it would be bad. So I certainly don't think that anybody should feel that responsibility and have that sort of forced upon them, because it is quite hard to make good political music. And you don't want to force someone to do it and then just get an absolute dud out of it.
I think that's kind of what we saw with Taylor Swift's gay anthem, all out of the blue, as a woman who has never identified within the LGBTQ plus community, and then all of a sudden made a song regarding like respecting the gays in 2018, which was very random.
Oh, do you know, I don't remember that song. Wasn't it just a line? Was it "You Need to Calm Down"?
Yeah, I think it was "You Need to Calm Down."
She threw in a couple.
Her whole music video.
Yeah, I mean, because
her whole music video was particularly painting kind of trailer park, Republican conservative America in a very caricaturized way. All of a sudden, when she was known to stay completely out of politics, and all of a sudden jumped into the conversation, that I don't think she's ever claimed affiliation with, to show support in a way that I guess the LGBTQ plus community in which I belonged in questioned how genuine it was, I would say.
I mean, I tend to see her through the lens of Dixie Chicks, whose career was, I mean, it wasn't destroyed, but there was certainly an effort to destroy their career based on one critical remark of George W. Bush in 2003. And there were literally records were being burned, and they were being banned from the radio. And it was like, I mean, now cancel culture is an idea, but that really is one of the few cases, I think, when there was a real attempt to literally cancel someone, to delete somebody from the music industry for a political opinion. And Taylor Swift has said that they were always held up. If you were a young country singer, they were like, don't be the Dixie Chicks. If you say the wrong thing politically, you can be destroyed. And so I think she had to come. It was, probably the Trump years and getting older that kind of pushed her in a different direction, and then meant that she would come out as a Democrat, and she would support, criticize Trump, and she would support local Democratic politicians. I mean, I think that song and that video was probably one of the kind of clumsier efforts to do that. But again, I think it was one of those those moments where somebody feels like they've self-censored for quite a long time. And I never had any impression that she, the sort of artist she is, the sort of people she works with, I never had any impression that she wouldn't be supportive of that community, but there was a fit that she just hadn't felt able to do anything. And so sometimes you get this slightly sort of gauche overcompensation.
Stuttering wasn't...
Yeah, which was not the best. I mean, I'd honestly forgotten about that. And I was more impressed by just statements she was making on social media about getting people.
She's done a great job.
Things like that. That seemed.
Yeah.
She's doing more what you said, like, you have to be the Bono, get up there, by any means. And then, kind of what Kai's doing, she's there was a lot of oppression for LGBT plus in Indonesia. So now she's, singing songs and raising awareness rather than, hidden with one song.
The curious thing that I suppose I found in the book was that there wasn't a correlation. There wasn't necessarily a correlation between sort of sincerity and deep understanding of an issue and the quality of the song. And that sometimes there was stuff that was written in a quite cynical way or written under duress, like James Brown's Loud and Black and Proud, which became this incredibly important song, but he just kind of didn't really want to write it. He stopped performing it quite quickly. Yeah, he was just pressure from kind of, I suppose some black power and legislating, because he was kind of a conservative, kind of bootstrap Republican kind of guy that was just like, well, I'm not going to let my race define me. I'm just going to show everybody because I'm just going to be the most brilliant, hardworking person, and that's what's important. So he wasn't politically. He was trying not to be politically black. And then because of this in 1968, there was a lot of pressure on him. And so he did this song, really under pressure. And it's incredible. And it's lasted and it inspired so many people. It was just, it was like, it changed pop because there had never been a song where you could just come out and say, I'm black. Literally, the black artists before then had to refer to blackness in these kind of coded ways. So to just come out and just go, I'm black. Incredibly powerful, important song. And yet he wasn't really that, he didn't really sort of walk the walk. He wasn't, and so it's an odd one.
I saw a documentary on Nina Simone, and I didn't realize she was trying to get guns. I mean, she was full on.
She was genuinely radical. She was very, very interested in politics, very bright and having very, in-depth conversations with people like James Baldwin and Lorraine Hansberry. And she had a real mission. I mean, as it is, she ended up very, unhappy and kind of retreated from that, which is another story that I noticed came up quite often, is he had somebody that would go all in and get very, very bruised by the backlash or by disappointment and feeling that they couldn't bring about the change that they wanted. And that it was often people, and they would recoil. It's like John Lennon just became ultra radical and then just stopped basically in 1972, just like not going to do politics anymore. And some people had a way back. So Marvin Gaye, he didn't really do much politics after 72 either, or any politics in his records then. He just kind of went off and did his other thing. And then there were other people like, I think, Nina Simone, who never really recovered from this really bruising period. And those are the people I suppose I was really drawn to emotionally, because you can see that among activists, is that you can get very hurt, you can get very bruised, you can be, obviously attacked by your enemies, but also let down by some of your allies. There's all these things that, a lot of activists are really unhappy. And I really felt for them, because that's quite different to being a pop star who makes a political record and then just goes back to doing what they were doing before.
How long was Dylan a protest singer yet? It's still the headline.
It's mental. Yeah, he was. I worked out that he wrote most of his famous protest songs it was something ridiculous like 20 months. Like almost all, not entirely all of them, because there were others scattered later on. But the ones that he is most famous for, the ones that made him protest singer Bob Dylan, were all written in a very short period of time. And then he was just like, well, now I need to move on. So I'm always interested in the people that can move on and the people for whom it's a lifelong mission. Someone like Tom Morello. Like it's a mission. He's written songs that aren't political, but he always comes back because he's an activist. So it's almost like there are musicians that write political songs, and then there are activists that make music. And they would probably be annoyed by that, by that distinction. But I think, because they go, well, we're musicians first. But I think some people really have that activist stamina. And I think it is a lot about stamina. I think it's being able to put up with a lot of criticism.
Which one are you, Kai?
I mean, you've kind of quoted me on accident, Dorian. I'm always like, I'm a musician first. I just write songs about my advocacy. However, I do realize that at this moment, I would say that most people view me as a protester rather than a musician in the lens of how I'm perceived and how media writes me. And that's perhaps, I guess, what I am showcasing to the world at this moment.
Right. And that may change. I mean, and because I suppose circumstances change, and I think that tension's always there. Is that sometimes even the most political musicians, they just want to make some different kinds of music, so that they get asked, even in interviews. I don't know how you find this, but in interviews, if you make political music, you can have an entire interview where nobody really asks you about the music. It's entirely about, what do you think of this issue? What can be done about this? What about this controversy? And that's, I think, is why a lot of people they either they retreat permanently or temporarily, because they're just like, this is not what I want to talk about.
I think it's a hard.
But all stand-up comedians do this, though. They have their stick. They get, I'm the Jewish guy. Let me tell you all the tough things about growing up being a Jew, and a lot of musicians maybe miss that trick, because once you do have identified with this community, I imagine it does help a lot.
Yeah. No, I think, however, I mean, that's just labels, isn't it? So I suppose in certain environments, I remember Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys saying that even though I think it was fairly obvious, fairly early on that he was gay, that he came out, took a few years to come out, because he wanted the band to be established as a band and not as a gay pop band, which in the 80s, I mean, now I think there's a lot of artists where people don't even know their sexuality. That's how much it's sort of moved on, is that there are some people that I have no idea until I'm reading an interview. Okay, right. But then it was such a label. He was like, I don't want to live with that. I don't want to be the gay pop singer. I want to be a pop singer. And this is, I suppose, one of the great advantages of diversity, is that you get to the point where you're not the only, you're not the only black artist in this arena, or you're not the only lesbian in that arena, or whatever, and so you don't have to sort of represent all the time. And being political is another thing like that. Is at certain times you will just be, you will only be seen as the political person. And I don't think any musician wants that to be the whole story.
Of course, it can be difficult when only one aspect of an individual's identity, whether it's their race or sexual orientation, becomes the only thing they're known for, rather than being viewed as more of a complex human being with emotions and other features like everyone else. People seem to get pigeonholed into this one way, which I think may be a reason why they then kind of swing the other way, and the pendulum turns to wants them to radicalize in ways that showcase other parts of who they are.
Yeah, I think that how you're talked about is so important, and that's why another thing that I came across in the book was just the role of the press. And that there were certain things that people just were tired of being asked about. Dylan is the classic example. He's like the kind of the mythic figure almost, of the guy who's concerned about politics. That's what some of his songs are about. And then people are basically going, he's the voice of generation. He's the one we've all been waiting for. He's the kind of prophet. And it sort of drives him mad, because then the intensity is almost like a prophet with his followers. It's just it was too much. And so he basically had to break a lot of people's hearts so that he could survive as an artist. And I think that is an extreme example. There are very few people, I think, who have that kind of scrutiny, that intensity early on. And I think it's probably easier if you come to it later. So Beyonce, not political for years, pretty political now. But if she wants to make a record that isn't, nobody's going to blame her for it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Or like you're saying with Taylor Swift, like nobody expects Taylor Swift now to do an album of protest songs. But if that's how you are introduced to the public
Forever.
then and I mean, it's the same in any musician, any artist. It's like how you're first introduced, what first makes you big is something that you kind of have to live with or work around or turn upside down, like, because that's the label sort of stuck on you. And I was really intrigued by people who were happy to live with that label, with that responsibility, like the Public Enemy say. And then people that were just like, I can't live my life being a spokesperson and an activist.
Okay, well, we've done this. I want to smoothly transition now into your next book without anyone noticing, because so you had songs all about, you've been talking about rising up, and now we're talking about 1984, which is staying down, now really the other extreme. How did you come to write this book?
This was, again, I suppose, like I was going to write a different book, and then I came to that. I'm just really interested. There were lots of dystopian fiction around, and I got to thinking, where do these ideas come from? Where do these things that are now cliches, where did they start? Which I'm interested in music as well. I've always been fascinated by, like, there'll be a certain thing in music, like I said with James Brown. It's like, oh, that's the first big song that actually talks about being black, right? And you can literally go, okay, there's before and after. And there's all kinds of cases like that, you know, where you invent a certain musical sound. You know, what's the first song that has this particular kind of like synthesizer rhythm or whatever? I'm always interested in that. And so in fiction, I thought, okay, where do these come from? And then that led me into sort of, a lot of them come from 1984, but where did Orwell get a lot of these ideas from? And that's almost a history of dystopian fiction. And I thought, oh, okay, well, the way to do this is to do it through 1984 because it's so famous. It's, you know, it's so interesting. And then you have a person at the center of it. You're fascinated. It's about Orwell, but then through that, you're learning about all these other things that perhaps the reader, if I just suddenly dropped the reader into like Zamyatin, 1920s Russia, they might be like, I don't know, why am I interested in this? And all as you sort of weigh in the way that the songs in the previous book, you weigh into talking about all kinds of different things. So then it became about, again, all just lots of different things I'm interested in, because that tends to be the way that the books work, is I'm just trying to address as much. Yeah, I just love sort of pursuing things I'm interested in and finding something that can kind of hold them together and keep the reader going through it. And then, of course, the timing, that Trump was elected while I was working on the idea. And then 1984 kind of shot up the bestseller list. And I thought, okay, right, well, here we go. This is the right time.
So why is it so topical? How maybe you could just give us a quick summary, like how did he come to write the book?
Oh God, I don't know if I can do a quick summary. I think what's striking about it is that it was years of thinking. Is you can look at what he was writing up to about a decade before, more than a decade before it came out, and you can see ideas, phrases, scenes even that ended up in 1984, which is very unusual. I think that for a book to take that long, it took him a long time to write. It took about 5 years from the first notes to the final thing, but then it took him years before then to sort of understand all the ideas about totalitarianism, about what, you know, about politics and propaganda and language and memory and historical memory and all these ideas. And so it's a huge sort of build up and it's quite sort of famous image of him on the Scottish island of Jura, you know, sick with tuberculosis, writing the novel. But what I found really fascinating is how long it took for all these ideas to come together. And I think because of that, it's a very layered book. There's a lot going on in it. And that means that it's always topical. So, you know, one cliche that often comes up when you write about an old thing is when people say it's more relevant than ever. And, you know, and is it? or, because actually with that book, it was really relevant when it came out. It was tremendously relevant when it came out. And then it was tremendously relevant almost every point since. Maybe after the end of the Cold War, it kind of dipped. But there's hardly a time when it hasn't been relevant, but what the aspect of it that's relevant changes. So now I think we're very interested in the nature of truth and writing and rewriting history and, disinformation. So that makes it seem very modern, but it also seemed very modern in the 1950s and in the 1980s when politics was very different. So it's maybe unusual in that sense, because there are some things that seem like at the moment, Camus' The Plague seems very relevant because we're in a pandemic. It didn't seem that relevant 5 years ago. It was great. It didn't seem that relevant. Whereas with 1984, I think there's always something going on in the realm of whether that be disinformation or surveillance or just oppression. Like he described totalitarianism and how authoritarian states suppress people. And there are countries around the world at any point in time that are behaving in a similar way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about how layered it is. Of course, you as you mentioned just now, totalitarianism. And then later on, I think we stepped into it being relevant based on the idea of surveillance and Big Brother to now with propaganda and what truth looks like nowadays and how we actually understand and discern what truth is. What do you think the other layers are there that have yet to become relevant that may in the upcoming future, considering you've looked in his mind?
Great question. I wish I'd asked that question.
We can give you credit for it, Jack.
I don't know whether
we split the writing on this project.
I don't know whether there's anything undiscovered, because obviously it's been so widely read and analyzed, but it's almost like they kind of like sine waves, they kind of rise and they fall. And I suppose it depends where you are in the world. There are still parts of the world where the stuff that was relevant to readers in the Eastern Bloc in the 1950s is really relevant now. The
North Korea,
the torture, the torture chambers, the constant surveillance. It's not kind of like surveillance by Google and Facebook, but genuine surveillance. The being arrested for, for something that you may have said in private. I mean, those sort of the real horrors that he described, which was obviously based on Nazi Germany and Stalin's Russia, those are super relevant in various parts of the world now, too many parts of the world. And I suppose in the West, we're interested in this more sort of, this kind of weird sort of more abstract notions of sort of, of the truth. And I mean, they have obviously real world effects. If you've got, say, vast numbers of Republicans that believe that Biden didn't win the election. I mean, that's a real problem, but it's a different kind of problem to the knock on the door in the night and the jackboots. And I think what Orwell did, which was very, very clever, was that his setting was totalitarian. And there was that layer of threat in the novel. Then the secret police who come and arrest you. But then there's all this other stuff which drew on a lot of his writing about British politics, which was to do with language and propaganda and bending the truth and the bad habits that you could fall into, that people can be very guilty of in a democracy. And he didn't exempt himself. He thought he was guilty of those things as well, sometimes. That he was almost like human nature, certain things like, confirmation bias and echo chambers and phrases that obviously didn't exist then, but, that's what he was describing. Demonizing your opponents, believing things that you want to be true, even if they're not true. And those are all things that we can see in liberal democracies. And I think that is probably what is so sort of timeless about that book, because you've got those two kinds of threats. If it was only about this awful regime that you couldn't identify with, if it was only over there, then it would be more limited. And Orwell did say before his death, he did put out a couple of press statements, and he did say, this could happen anywhere. Please don't think that this is just a satire of Russia. You have to understand that this could happen.
What do you think about these mix of regimes? Because a lot of people are worried about the cancel culture and, woke and the Dixie Chicks getting cancelled, things like that. But if that got into a governmental level, it wouldn't be communism, wouldn't be fascism. What would it be? Have you thought about that?
The problem is about cancel culture is it's such a vague term. I don't really know what it means.
Thank you for admitting that.
But it's just, it's associated, because it's largely associated with the left and a lot of time people losing their jobs and occasionally a book getting dropped by a publisher. But I suppose if we take it seriously, because cancel was a tongue-in-cheek term on Twitter, as when this person is cancelled now. And it was like, there was a certain humor to it. It's like, obviously they're not cancelled. It's just going, I'm not going to listen to this musician anymore. I'm not going to watch this show anymore because of something that they've said. It was kind of humorous. But the more people use the word cancel, then you have to think, well, okay, what is actually cancel? Because then you're talking about serious sort of censorship, crushing backlash. And that is not just happening on the left at all. A lot of the time, and if you're looking worldwide, that is more often happening on the right in an authoritarian regime that's that's sort of banning, that's literally banning books. And I think the global's perspective is quite useful because I see so much fuss about somebody getting dropped from a TV show or, some Dr. Seuss books no longer being published. And yet you look at, say, what's happening in Poland and Hungary, and there's things that can't be, let alone say, China. And there's literally things that can't be said and that can't be published. And there are people who are being forced out of their jobs by the state. So it's already happening, but it's not to do with wokeness. I don't think there's anywhere in the world where you have an authoritarian wokeness.
Portland.
It's not the state doing that. So all the cases of so-called cancel culture, really, they're about individual things. Some I agree with, some I don't agree with.
But doesn't it start like with the Stasi, for example, like the Stasi were a small organization comparatively, but people were always calling on their neighbors and, enforcing on everyone wants to push down on someone else. Do you think that was in 1984 as well, that it's people enforcing each other?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's the children informing on their parents in 1984, which is something he'd taken from Russia. I mean, he didn't live long enough to see what the Stasi did. But yeah, no, there's definitely a kind of, there's definitely that instinct in people. You can see all these instincts. The problem is perspective, because a lot of time people go, here are some features of fascism, or here are some features of Stalinism. And we can see these features in
they meet at the back, though.
Britain and America, or wherever you may be. Yeah. You can see some of those. It doesn't mean you're on the verge of fascism or Stalinism. Like it's like when the fascists like flags. Well, not everybody likes flags as a fascist. Like some people, there's a lot of people that wave flags for various reasons.
Okay, love flags, You
think? So, likewise, it's like you can say, okay, well, that the communists, Maoists have these particular kind of strictures and you can't say this and you can't say that. And then maybe versions of sort of self-censorship in just a kind of, in a sort of liberal left, community, in a clique, and there's certain things that you can't say. So it doesn't mean you're on the verge of Maoism. And so I always think it's quite important. And I think 1984 is a really good reminder of that Orwell was going, these are things that could happen here, but they're not happening here yet. And to respect, I think, people who really are in extreme situations. I think that's so important to not. It's why I don't often compare things to fascism and Stalinism and so on. because I think the extreme suffering that people experience in those conditions, those regimes, is not comparable to a Twitter mob. It doesn't mean doesn't mean the Twitter mob is good. It doesn't mean it hasn't made someone miserable. But you know, there has to be this context, because people cite 1984 all the time as like, oh, it's just like 1984 what's going on in Britain now. And it's like, it's really not. And you should maybe look at other parts of the world and look at history and sort of see the difference. Which is not to say that there aren't some maybe bad habits and things that you should kind of like look out for or criticize. I worry about the hyperbole, like political discourse now. There's so much hyperbole, and everybody just seems to be like a step away from totalitarianism.
Yeah. I mean, he did write those books. There was a lot of, he based it on things. We think he predicted everything, but it had already happened, though.
Yeah, there's a few things obviously he's using in a kind of more sci-fi way, but most of the things he's describing are they either literally happened, or he's exaggerating for effect. So I think nobody in Stalin's Russia literally said that, like O'Brien does, that they could suspend gravity if they wanted. But they did say things like, oh, this person never existed.
It was metaphorically true.
You know, they did say possible things. Right. So he wasn't really trying to predict anything. And the things that maybe it seems like he predicted were the bits that he wasn't actually that well informed about. And the telescreen. He never explains how the telescreen works.
Well, maybe that's one of the reasons, you know, it's timeless, because he doesn't go into the details of the technology.
Right. Exactly. Because it seems more high tech, because he didn't have a television. I mean, maybe if it had television and he made the telescreen sound more like a 1940s television, then
right,
then it would seem more dated. So yeah, because you do operate more on the level of sort of satire and metaphor, which is where a lot of that's obviously where a lot of science fiction works. And maybe the more in depth and techy it gets, the less interested I am. Certainly, maybe the less resonant, because then it just seems kind of niche as well.
Yeah, facial recognition, it would always be out of date, wouldn't it? In this, if he had made it specific.
Yeah, although I mean, I'm sure there are good books written very much about what's happening now, and you're talking about those new technologies. But you know, we're talking about 94, 70 years later. So there are good books now, but will they last?
Maybe he was always,
you know,
when did he write Animal Farm? Was that?
He wrote that in 44 to 45.
So that was pure conceptual.
No, 43 to 44, sorry.
So that was like a purely conceptual thing. And then he did this as kind of a 1984 as kind of a more grounded version, do you think? Or?
The two different ways of telling a similar story, and they're kind of like a prequel and a sequel in a way, because one is about the betrayal, how the revolution is betrayed, and then 1984 is about what happens, what life is like decades after the revolution has been betrayed. So if you're going to want to, I kind of feel like, because he doesn't really explain that well how we got from our world to the world of 1984. But then I kind of felt like, oh, he does that in Animal Farm. And if you want to understand roughly what happened, he explains it in Animal Farm. He explains that process. And so there are two books in which he's trying to explain how totalitarianism works. And they overlap quite a lot in their ideas about language and memory and power and untruth. But it's kind of remarkable that he's really trying to get at the same thing. And then one of them is like a book about animals that children can understand, specifically based on the details of Russian history. And then the next is a kind of like satirical sci-fi novel. And both of them are still being read, even though they were him really trying to get his head around problems that were very, very specific to the 1940s, he thought.
If he hadn't died then, what book would he have written afterwards, do you think?
From what I could tell from what his reading and his note taking and his letters to friends, he wanted to do something like just a more straightforward novel. I think he didn't want to write anything more about totalitarianism. Felt like the war was over. He made his point. This stuff, he'd been thinking about this stuff for years, and he seemed to want to write a more like a family saga or a historical novel.
Something light.
Or it's really interesting because you do wonder what would have happened, because if his next book was just this kind of like family saga about England, and it was like from the author of Animal Farm in 1984, and maybe people would have been just like, what the hell happened? Like Dylan. He could have been like Dylan.
Exactly.
I was writing all protest songs. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it when people do that. Okay, well, that's been great. We should probably start wrapping up soon, but you have something else to add, Kai?
No, thank you so very much, Dorian. I just wanted to say I once took a course in the US in college about the history of African American music. And we used excerpts of your book, 33 Revolutions Per Minute, regarding how specifically protest music within African American rights. So I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my God, that's amazing. I really love it when there's like any schools or colleges who use it. I'm like really, really pleased. Because I thought, oh, okay, well, if this is useful.
You were unexpected.
That's really good. When was this?
Well, this was in 2015, the end of 2015. Yeah. So
Okay.
thank you. And it's weird to figure out that you are a British man instead of like, being American or American. But I think it's amazing that you had interest in that specific topic of protest.
Are you disappointed in another white
Oh
man?
no, I'm titillated
Yes,
and wholeheartely attracted by his dashing good looks.
I'm always disappointed to be another white English man.
I mean,
Colonialism.
you're a good one. You're a good one.
Thank you. No, thank you. I'm just really. No, it's really nice to that it was just, I don't know, that just was useful to you in thinking about certain things.
Yeah,
particularly as a
I mean,
musician yourself.
that course specifically led me down a path of recognizing the power music has in terms of being able to create movements and create camaraderie and connection. So I would say that you have a big hand in doing so, since you were part of the course.
Wow. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I suppose we didn't mention when you said what can music do. Music and civil rights movement is the kind of classic example, but that wasn't really pop song. It was weird. They were old spirituals, and they were kind of satirical songs, and then they were versions of recent hits with the lyrics changed. It's a whole different musical tradition, but it was absolutely essential to that movement. As I think in Chile as well, the music was really important there. And it's weird the way that it isn't so much the soundtrack. If I go on a protest march, and I've gone marches for various different causes, music doesn't play that role in the same way. And if it does, they're like really old songs. It is still, we shall overcome, give peace a chance. And it's great that those songs endure, but it's kind of weird that we're reaching back that far for the song that everybody knows.
Well, I think it's musicians are letting it down a lot. If you read the lyrics of the modern music as well, they're not trying, are they? I mean,
I wonder whether we just lost a singing tradition, the idea that everyone could sing, certainly in the West, because that was what the civil rights stuff was. It wasn't listening. So now you might go on a protest march, and there'll be a sound system, and there'll be music that you can hear, and somebody might be selecting good protest songs that sound great and get everyone fired up. But We Shall Overcome and Give Peace a Chance are from this like much older tradition where they were meant to be sung by everyone. It wasn't really meant to be about Pete Seeger or John Lennon or whoever recorded it. It was meant to be about everybody, melodies that everybody could sing. And I suppose that's not something that anybody's writing anymore. That's such an old tradition.
So Hang the DJ is another protest song then, for what we should be doing.
That's a good one to sing along to. But yeah, sort of group singing. But I'm sure that's different in different parts of the world, though. I'm always aware of how much like I had to focus on Western pop and that tradition. And even stepping into Nigeria and Jamaica and Chile, I'm like, oh, there's this whole other tradition. There's overlap, but it's not the same assumptions. There's not the same industry, and there's not the same audience expectations. And there's other parts of the world where I'm just like, you know, I think probably politics and music function very differently.
That's great. So your book about art imitated the art of Kai, and now we have to write a song to imitate this conversation.
Full circle.
That's very exciting, actually.
Full.
Many circles within the circle.
Yeah.
So when the podcast comes out, then do you sort of you have the conversation and then you end with the song?
It magically appears at the end of the song. Like it took no effort. Yeah.
That's yeah.
Well,
thank you.
Good luck.
Well,
Good luck, Kai.
Well, I'm not worried. I was worried about the lyrics before, and we have to put all this meaning in. But you've just said that it doesn't matter at all. So
I will be listening to the lyrics. I will be listening very closely.
yeah, but that doesn't matter. I mean, it's just we're just gonna put in some random words and then have
and then make it like something choral that
chorus
people can
line.
sing along to, and maybe like a chanting section.
Yeah, just-
very simple lyrics.
just
Yeah.
Let's just
Perfect.
repeat one
Yeah.
line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's make it easy.
Just all you have to do is replace "We Shall Overcome." It's not.
And
it's
then
not
we
much
have a
to
perfect
ask.
song. Timeless, like 1984's.
Yeah.
Like 1984 has been. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Was that a short book as well? Was your book longer than his book? Was the one thing I wanted to ask.
Was my book longer than 984? Probably slightly. Probably. Yeah, it was really weird because I wrote it about the same. I was pretty much the same age as Orwell when he wrote that. And the publication schedule was almost the same. It was finished in December and it came out in spring. Mine came out, I think, like a couple of weeks before his would have come out. It was this weird patterning. Obviously his is better. Wins on that front. His is better.
Wow,
but it was
such
quite-
modesty.
It was quite strange being like, and being like, oh my God, he was about to die pretty much at this age.
How are you feeling?
I mean, I'm not, not great. Could be fitter, but I don't have tuberculosis, so that's good.
Yeah, we have COVID, so just stay indoors and.
Yeah.
All right, brilliant. Well, I had a lovely chat.
Thanks, guys. It was a really real pleasure to meet you and talk to you.
Of course. Thank you so very much.
All right, brilliant. Thanks,
All right.
Dorian.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Take care, guys.
I think we have a lot of material.
Yeah, it's too much.
I think we need to write a protest song.
Okay, about what?
Or in the vein of a protest song.
Oh, a parody of a protest. What are we going to protest about?
The importance of protesting?
Important of speaking up and standing up.
The importance of protesting song. What do you
Yeah,
think about that?
Instead of just writing meaningless pop songs.
Yeah, what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, that sounds great. I think we should go with that flow.
I think we can take it in a way where we even maybe refer to, if we could subtly refer to some of the songs he mentions in his book, like the 33 songs, and do like an homage to kind of certain eras and the songs he's highlighted in the book. That
Well,
may
I'll
be
keep
something
it simple. Oh, don't make it too complicated.
Okay, sorry, we'll just chant, like
Let's do the chat.
like protest more.
I think we have to somehow protest 1984. Somehow we have to mention both books as well. Somehow. So
Yeah, like protest more, or we'll turn
Yeah.
it, or protest more like it's 1984.
whoa, there we go.
Right.
Yeah, there was that Prince song, Dance Like It's 19. We're going to dance like it's 1999. This could
Yeah.
be that it's something like it's 1984.
Oh, are we gonna go like Prince-esque in the production quality?
Mm.
Can your four guys handle that?
I can't sing. No, We'll have to see. I don't know what kind of style of song. That's quite an important question to ask. Do you want it? What kind of? What genre
I'm
should?
open with it.
Okay.
I think we can take this in many directions.
Yeah.
I just perusing your online portfolio on Spotify, it seems like it's more in a direction of like acoustic instrumentation, correct? It's like your bread and butter.
It's all types. Yeah. I mean, oh, you mean in terms of yeah, not
Meaning
electronic.
your personal music? Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
there's like it's acoustic, the real instrumentation
Real instrumentation. Yeah. We don't
rather
have any,
than synth programming.
Yeah. We're not that kind of a electronic. We don't have that in our skill set yet.
It's a hard skill set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something for the future.
Yeah, of course, because electronic music always about the future somehow.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. I think we can just work with what's most comfortable for your people, especially because that's
Okay.
important. I want to make sure they
Yeah.
are
Sound like.
in their wheelhouse.
Okay.
But if we're like looking for a protest song, I think something with a little bit more of like an upbeat tempo, like an allegro pace,
Okay.
may help that. I
Okay.
feel like most important thing is I think we make the song dynamic. He seemed very vivacious.
He's
In the
a
beginning,
fantastic- Yeah.
it was like a little awkward. I thought he was going to be very standoffish, but it kicked in.
He's a music fan. No, he's passionate about music, so we have to make a great song for him.
Exactly, and he's a music critic as well. We
Shit.
chose
Yeah, she's the hardest person to write for.
right.
Bugger.
Right. I know.
I don't listen to the
I made
critics
this
anyway,
hard.
so.
Yeah, so I think we can do something good.
All right, well, you go
Uh,
away and digest it, and I'll do the same, and then let's email back some ideas, whatever we come up with, and let's get the ball rolling, yeah?
Do you have like keys you prefer? I don't know your vocal range.
You'll be singing it.
Fully?
Fully, yeah.
I thought you'll be singing it with me.
No, I could do some backing vocals, but no,
We need you in it. You're a healthy British man.
I'll do oohs and ahs.
Yeah,
We'll see.
we
We'll
need-
see what goes with it.
Okay.
We'll let the song decide.
What's your due date, just so I can plan it in? I'm quite structured in that, just so I can make sure I make time for it.
Well, I think we should do it straight away. We really should concentrate on it this week, while it's hot. Because if we wait 2 weeks, it's just so hard. Do it now. It's really the best.
So
Once you're feeling
now,
better,
right
once
as-
you've over your vaccine. Yeah. definitely.
Okay.
Once you're vaccinated.
So I'll get back to you with some lyrical ideas, and if I have any melodies, I'll send that to you. Same with you.
Brilliant.
And we're looking at around like an average 3-minute song.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Thanks, Kai.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Ciao, arrivederci. Buona cena, buonasera.
Oh, grazie mille. Bye.
Prego. Ciao.
To those who call for uprising and bloodshed to begin, who holler that the system must be torn down from within. If you want to drive out the dark, well, stand up with light in your heart. You're acting like it's 1984, and you need a revolution, screaming for a storm raging the war. Trying to tear down institutions, spreading hate, liberate, anger, bait, and nothing more. We're in need of resolution, acting like it's 1984. An eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. With peace in your actions, there's peace in your mind. If you want to drive out the dark, well, stand up with light in your heart. You're acting like it's 1984, and you need a revolution, screaming for a storm raging the war. Trying to tear down institutions, You're acting like it's 1984, and you need a revolution. Acting like it's 1984, trying to tear down institutions. Acting like it's 1984, when we need a resolution. Acting like it's 1984.
Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the show and the song. If you want to hear the song again, it's available on all music streaming services or for a $1 download from podsongs.com. You can also subscribe there for our newsletter, for all other news and updates. A big thanks to our musical production team here in Italy, Maurizio Sanecola, Massimino Vozza, and Luigi Falcione, and my researcher, Dori Verbo. Please help us by sending this episode to your friends, sharing it on social media, and reviewing it wherever you can. I also have another show to listen to. It's called The Mystic Cast, and it's about spirituality, UFOs, mysticism, the occult, and the Ethereal Society, the teachings of which led me to start this project, serving the servers, helping those who help others. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great day.